Hey friends, welcome back. Now I really hope you played around with the different functionalities and created your final report for this specific dataset. Now afterwards, of course, please save your work. Also, maybe you want to review it later on and then close the specific report page in here, because now we want to create a new report and dive into a different dataset, which is a little bit different and gives a little bit more information than only product 1, product 2, and so on. So you see that I already opened the new Power BI report. That is fine. And now I can connect to data. Now, in order to do this, you know that when we want to use an Excel file, which is in here also the case, you can either click on Excel here directly, you can go to Excel workbook up here, or go to get data and click Excel workbook here. Or of course, finally, you could also click on more here or get data from another source here. And then if I do that, then the pop-up window appears, which asks me exactly what kind of data source it is. And the first one is Excel workbook again. So Excel is still heavily used in a lot of companies, so it's still often a specific data source, even though, of course, probably it's much better to use any kind of database, right? But for us now, to follow along, we use an Excel file. So click on Excel, click on Connect, and then select the PBI training number 2, which is this file here, which you can also find and download from the resource section to follow along. Let me click on Open, and then let's just wait until Power BI is recognizing the data. Here we go, and we can see we got here 3 different worksheets, which is employees, orders, and suppliers. And we also got tables in here. So we have learned during the course that it is best practice to import tables if we are sure we only want to have the data from the tables and we want to avoid doing additional cleaning steps in the Power Query editor. So let's just check that. Click on employees here, and we can say a preview of the employee data. Okay, let's click on orders and maybe also make the window maybe a little bigger. And we can see here the order data, which is truncated. So it's only a preview, but I think the data here looks actually fine. And if I go to suppliers here and take this option, I also can see suppliers in here. So that should also be fine. So then let's select the 3 tables. Let me just check those 3 boxes in here. And we do not use the sheets, we use the tables instead. And to make sure that there are no additional issues, let's go on to transform data. Again, I'm still wondering why Power BI is highlighting the load, because people are then tend to click on the load directly. But always best practice, if you know that, or if you don't know in advance that the dataset is really in perfect shape, which is probably never the case, it's much better to click on transform data and take a look at the query editor first, just to make sure that actually the data is exactly the way you want it to be structured. So we can see here employees, suppliers, and orders. Let's take a look at the suppliers first, because that's the table we can see here. And we got a supplier ID. Also very important, make sure that the data type is correct. 1, 2, 3, that is fine. ABC, this is text, that's also fine. And ABC for the country is also fine. So that looks good. The only thing I'd like to adjust here is actually the name, because I'd like to name this supplier, and then I will use the abbreviation TBL for table. So it's up to you. You don't have to name it the same way as I do here, but that's one syntax which I often use. Then I will go to the employees table. So the employees table is also a dimension table, and the orders table will be our fact table. But this time it's different, because here we don't have to at first combine 3 different sales tables, as we have learned and how to do this with the other dataset. So for the employees table, we take a look. We got also an employee ID. Also the data type is fine, and also the same is true for the other options in here as well. So that looks good. The only thing here, again, what I would like to do is rename this table, and I call it employee, and then TBL as an abbreviation for table. So finally, let's take a look at the orders table here, our facts table. And here we can see again, the data types, and also whether the data is complete or is there any missing data. It's also highlighted by the green bar. And if you hover over it, you'll see also some information about that. So one thing which I noticed here immediately is we got 2 different dates in here, which is the order date and the ship date. However, as you can see that the order date is formatted correctly here. So this is the 4th of July 2020 and so on. And you can also see the calendar icon in here. For the ship date, this is not the case. So Power BI is treating the ship date currently as a number. So this is something I like to adjust, because maybe later on I would also like to use the ship date. So to do this, let's actually click here and let's actually try to convert this into a date. So be aware that the latest step currently is change type. This is the latest automatic step which Power BI has done. And because of that, if my next step is also changing the type, if I click on that, you'll see that now it asks me, do I want to replace actually my conversion in the last step, or do I want to add a new step? Again, Power BI is forcing you to replace the current step, just maybe to avoid to having too many steps in the applied steps window. But again, best practice probably is using add new step. And the reason for this is if I add a new step, then I can make sure that if the step which I add leads to errors or is not that what I want, I can easily revert it. If on the other hand I replace the current step, that means that if I remove the current step, so the change type, then all data types of all the columns get removed. So that's why I personally prefer always add a new step, just to make sure that this really works what I want to do. So if I say add new step here, and you see it does not work. So I have received errors, and this is exactly why it's better to have this change type number 1, because now it's much easier to simply remove only this specific type change. So if I click on the cross symbol here, you see that I got my original data back. So why does this not work? Well, one thing which I experienced is sometimes, or actually almost often, it's better to first convert a number, specifically when it comes to dates, into text values. So let's give this a try. Click here and say I want to convert this into text. Let's do that. And again, I will add a new step, even though converting to text actually never leads to an error. At least if you have a proper number, for instance. But still, I'd like to add a new step. And you see that now the ship date is transformed into ABC, which means text. And now let's actually try that. Let's go in here and convert this now into a date. And I don't want to replace the current step, otherwise I would again convert it directly from number to date, which we've seen which does not work. So I want to keep my current step, first converting into, in this case, text, and then I want to add a new step, converting it from text into date. Let's click on new step, and now it works properly, as you can see here, and also we get a green bar on here, so no errors. So this obviously works. Why exactly is that the case? I can't really answer this for you, but this is one way you could try it if you also receive the errors which you have seen, which I got when I tried to convert it from the number directly into the date. And also be aware that you can always count on this option if you go to convert here, that you can always choose using local. And then specify, we've seen this for the dollar amount, for population, for instance. Remember what we extracted from the web, and then we can use a local setting in order to convert maybe the date or a number into a specific format. But be aware that also using local, probably it's easier to first convert it into a text, okay? So here. So that's what my recommendation for you is, just in case you receive errors in the future. Okay, so we got a ship date and also the calendar icon, and let's scroll to the right. What else do we have? We can see here the numbers, which are decimal numbers. That is totally fine for these values in here. Discount, product name, supplier, and so on. So that looks fine to me. There is, I can see here, some customer zip code missing here. If I hover over that, obviously there are 3 empty values, but the customer zip code itself is actually not a really important column, and I will not use it at all. So it doesn't matter to me. I could also remove it here directly, but if it would be a real live scenario, you probably would like to figure out why the zip codes are missing, and you probably want to address this to the person who is actually preparing the data for you, in case this is a relevant column for you. Of course, if the data not relevant at all, then it doesn't make sense to waste any time in order to investigate that. So for me, that's fine. That looks good. So I got this as well. And one last thing is I want to import a dates table. But before I do that, let me just give you one additional thing, very important, so you don't run into issues later on with other reports as well, and if you continue working with Power BI. we want to combine the employees table, the orders table, and suppliers table. And again, we will do this because we have in the orders table here, for instance, an employee ID. And also we have a supplier ID. I just need to scroll a little bit probably, but there's somewhere there must be a supplier ID column. Let's just see. I currently can't see it. There it is, supplier ID, right? So we will use those columns to create our relationships in the model. However, we need to be aware that the data type should be the same. So that is why I paid attention to the data type 1, 2, 3 here, as well as in the suppliers table that there's also a data type 1, 2, 3. Because if the data type differs, then the relationship might lead to issues, right? So that's why be aware that the columns you want to create the relationship on should have the same data type. Okay, so after we cleared that, let's actually go to new source, and we will use the blank query. And here we will go to the advanced editor, click this option, and remove the pseudocode which is inside. We don't need this. And instead, we will use the dates table again. So simply Control-A to select everything, Control-C to copy, and then I will go inside here, my model, and I will use Control-V to paste it. So let me click Done. And now we have, again, our parameters where we can enter the specific date range we're going to use. So as I said, it's exactly the same query as in the last model, and you can use this for all your future Power BI reports if you want to do that. So let's actually go to the orders table, just quickly check. The order date starts in 2020 and it ends, let's actually load everything just to make sure. And if I scroll down, it ends in 2022. Obviously in May 2022, but I want to have the full year, so we'll go with starting of the year 2020 up to the end of the year 2022. So let's do that. Let's go to the query here and say we're going to start on the 1st of January. So 1st of January in 2020. And my end date here will be the 31st of December in 2022. The financial year start month again will be 1 because we just assume that our financial year starts in January. But of course you can adjust this if you want. And also if you have an additional table which contains holidays, so specific dates, you can then from this table here choose a specific column if you want to do that. So for us that's fine. And let's actually invoke this function, invoke. Now we got our invoked function here, and then I simply rename this function as _dates_tbl, just to be here synchron with the other names I gave it here. Oh, one thing I forgot, let's actually do that here as well. For the order, let's order's name is order_tbl. Okay. Now we could, of course, create now here with the right click a group of, in this case, a folder of the used tables in the model. However, in this case, I actually don't need to do this because I will use all the tables in here. So I think it's not really necessary to create an additional group in here, but you could do that, of course, if you want. Okay, so we are good to go. And next we can load this data into the model. So we can click on close and apply, click on close and apply here, and then we load the data into the model. And yeah, that's it for this video. You can see no errors here. Tables are available here in the field list, and we are good to go to get started with our report. So that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.